Torture and inhuman or degrading treatment is absolutely prohibited and cannot be justified or tolerated under any circumstances, neither towards adults nor children. On December 10, 1984, the United Nations adopted the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. According to this convention, torture is any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining from them or a third person information or a confession, punishing them for an act they or a third person committed or is suspected of having committed, intimidating or coercing them or a third person, or for any reason based on discrimination of any kind when such pain or suffering is inflicted by or at the instigation of or with the consent or acquiescence of a public official or other person acting in an official capacity. The specialists classify torture as physical torture, psychological or white torture, and sexual torture. Any form of torture can have physical, mental, and social consequences for the victim. Children feel the consequences of torture more acutely. According to the existing classifications jointly developed by medical doctors and lawyers, the consequences of torture can be physical, psychological, and social. Physical consequences, which may be identified: bruising, hematomas, superficial and deep tissue or limb injuries, craniocerebral trauma, spinal cord trauma, post-traumatic otitis, and impaired hearing and severe prognosis, fractures, facial disfigurement, genital injuries, sexually transmitted diseases, contusions of internal organs, especially kidneys. Torture has severe psychological consequences as well. Mainly, the victims exhibit post-traumatic stress disorder, dominant anxiety and depressive states, among other symptoms such as disturbing memories of the traumatic events, sleep disorders, frequent insomnia, nightmares about their arrest and detention, especially in the acute period or immediately after the ill treatment. The increased nervousness persists long after the trauma and often leads to deteriorating relationships with others, including with family members. It leads to a complicated living environment for the victim and their entourage. Social consequences of torture involve affected educational process, difficulties in social and professional integration after release, increased risk of social exclusion, social labeling and discrimination, deterioration of social relations, including with loved ones. All these consequences intensify social isolation of this category of children and increase the risk of delinquent behavior or affiliation with criminal groups because they feel rejected by the rest of society. Protection against torture is an absolute human right which does not admit derogations by the state in any form, neither on grounds of public emergency, state security, combating terrorism, or any other reason. Children coming in contact with the criminal justice system enjoy a set of rights and guarantees against torture, which the specialists in the field are obliged to know, and the parents or legal guardians of the children should know. A child's detention or arrest are applied only as exceptional measures and only in cases stipulated by law. If a child is detained or arrested, the parents or legal guardians must be notified immediately. Children in detention or under arrest must be detained separately from adults and already incarcerated children. Within 1 hour after the minor's detention, the prosecuting authority must request from the Territorial Office of the National Council for state-guaranteed legal aid, or other parties acting on its behalf, a public defender, which would provide free and state-guaranteed emergency legal aid. The detainee is immediately informed about the grounds for detention. The minor suspect accused has the right to confidential meetings with a defender without their number or duration being limited. The minor's interrogation is to take place only in the presence of a chosen defender or lawyer. The minor's interrogation cannot take longer than 2 hours without recess, and it cannot exceed 4 hours per day with mandatory participation of the defender, teacher, or psychologist. From the moment of arrest or arrival at the detention facility, all minor detainees must be seen by a doctor or medical assistant without delay and preferably in conditions of privacy. Considering the gender characteristics, boys and girls will be treated differently. In cases of children in conflict with the law, detention or arrest should be considered the last resort. Still, if a child has been detained, they must be informed of their accusations directly and as soon as possible. Or, if it is the case, through their parents or legal guardian. The child should have legal, medical, or any other appropriate assistance for the preparation and presentation of the defense. The child victims of torture have the right to file complaints in both national and supranational courts. The European Court of Human Rights, for example. Specialists working with children must remember that minors in conflict with the law are exposed to an increased risk of abuse and ill treatment, and the authorities have a special obligation to protect these children from violence. The specialist must report and solve cases of child torture and ill treatment to ensure child-friendly judicial proceedings according to international standards. Protect the children.